I need you to be more charismatic.
Ha! Okay, so I've been doing different subjects from Isaiah 61, and I might get to that, but I might not. Something else I wanted to go through first and talk about, and sometimes that's whatever I can just start with something and it could end up going the whole time, or it could be like 5 minutes long and I'll get to the other thing, and then that could possibly be 5 minutes long, but I don't think so, knowing this group. So with the prospective move out of our home and into a different building, I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about church. You're like, uh-oh, I'm out of here. I was talking about church. I don't know about that. Well, I'm going to talk about that. Yeah, where did you hear that? In church, right? That church is the people. It's not the building. And it sounds really good. And to an extent, there might be some truth to that as far as just kind of getting the attention off of the building and what's really important. But when I looked up the word church in the dictionary and actually saw what Webster has to say about it, the number one, the main, really the only definition that I saw, at least in the dictionary that's on my computer, so it has to be right, because otherwise Mac wouldn't have it on their computer. It says a building used for public Christian worship. That's what it says. And there's, I couldn't really, when it goes to the origin of the word, it's difficult to really follow exactly what it's saying. In Old English, you have this Cyrese. I've heard some people have said something about circle or something, or a word that means circle. I didn't really see that here, but there's a related Dutch word kerk and German Kirche, or Kirsch. I don't know German, so I don't know how you pronounce it. Based on medieval Greek, kurikon, sounds like a Star Trek character. From the Greek kuriakon doma, which it means Lord's house, and from kurios, which means master or lord, and it says compare with kirk. So apparently the word kirk means church, which makes me wonder who Captain Kirk really is. Things you learn about the Pope. Now, so everything that I see in the dictionary, the English dictionary for the English word church, which in our language, it's what we ought to be, what we're communicating when we say the word church. Now, certainly within churches kind of have their own lingo and what they, different places you can be, whether it's a business or a church or a different group or whatever. They can have develop their own definitions for things, and I think that in churches, we've kind of changed the word church to mean more the people, or to refer to the people. But yet I'm not really seeing that being exemplified in the dictionary so much. Even when you go back to the origin of the word, it's always referring to the building, which is being used for the purpose of worshiping God. Yeah.
What's the Hebrew word that they translate for church in the New Testament is the same word that's used for the Israelites and whatnot in the Old Testament? What is that word?
I'm going to be getting to the Bible words shortly next, so I'll get to that probably.
Wait for the rabbi channel.
So when we see the word church in our Bible, because I know everybody's going to go in the Bible and say, well, I see the word church in my Bible. Actually, church is not in the Bible. I don't know if based on the definition of church that I just gave you, church is not in the Bible. You say, well, it's right here in multiple times in my Bible, and if King James said it, it's got to be right. The thing is it's only the word church. You're only going to find it unless you're using some paraphrase kind of Bible that really isn't a Bible. You're only going to find the word church translated in the New Testament, not in the Old Testament. And the word that is translated as church is ecclesia. Now, when you look at the definition of what ecclesia means, it says, according to Strong's, it says a gathering of citizens called out from their homes into some public place, an assembly. A lot of different things that breaks down to an assembly of the people convened at the public place of the council for the purpose of deliberating, the assembly of the Israelites, any gathering or throng of men assembled by chance or tumultuously, however you want to think of that. But in a Christian sense, it can be an assembly of Christians gathered for worship and religious meeting, a company of Christian, or for those who, hoping for eternal salvation through Jesus Christ, observe their own religious rites, hold their own anyway, everything that I see in Strong's having to do with ecclesia, it has to do with people. So then that may be where the church is saying, well, it's not the building, it's the people. But then we translate the word ecclesia, which means the people, it has nothing to do with the building, with a word that means the building. That's like using the word for water and translating it as cup. Or anything. One thing is the container, and the other thing is what you put in it. So we're taking the word that specifically and only means is what you put in the container, and we're translating it as the container. So why would I point that out? I point that out because we've been meeting in our home for 6 years now. Maybe not all of us, but at least some of us have. And we don't tend to think of it as church because it's a home. It looks like a home. It feels like a home.
It is a home.
And it is a home, but when you define church as a building that's used where people gather to worship God, then at least on Friday nights, it's a church. It looks like our home, but it's actually a church. So we've actually kind of done the bait and switch on you, and you've been going to church and you didn't know it.
Right.
Oh, man. Sneaky, aren't we? So now we're starting to meet in a building that actually is a church. It looks like a church. It feels like a church. Now we feel like, oh, now I'm going to church. Well, you are, but you have been anyway if you've been coming to our fellowship. So there really isn't. It looks a little different. It feels a little different because it's not as homey. But we can. But we can.
That sounds better that way.
Okay, but we can. Maybe in the future, we as we go on, we can get creative and come up with some ways to make the atmosphere feel a little bit better. It has to be temporary stuff for the most part, but we can still. When I was in college, I was in Grand Rapids, and there's a large church in town that had I think it was Friday night ministry called Club Paradiso, and it was actually a Christian dance club. And despite the fact that I was going to a Baptist college at the time, I still went, even though I wasn't supposed to. But they had this one room that they had the lights, and they played Christian dance music, and it was really a whole lot of fun. And once in a while I would stay there until they closed, and when they would close, they would turn on the lights, and it would look like this. But before that, they had the lights out, and they just had like lamps, and then they had the dance lights and everything. So it looked entirely different. It went from something that actually looked kind of like a dance room to just a regular room, and it was like, wow, this is kind of weird how this actually looks when you turn on the lights. It's like a normal room. So there's things that you can do with lighting if you get creative. Again, we can't do anything permanent, but we can make things a little bit better. We thought about trying to bring couches in here, but there's young people who use this room, and AA meets here, and different other groups that wouldn't respect stuff like that. So we were advised. He didn't say we couldn't, but we were advised against bringing couches and stuff in. So, but there's things that we can do. Yeah. Now, when we look at the Bible and we see what the Bible calls the church, it's referring to the people. Now, and the main word that I'm seeing here associated with ecclesia is an assembly. And so an assembly of people who are gathering to worship God, that can happen really anywhere. And so it can be in a home, it can be in a building, it can be in a park, it can be when we at Yom Teruah, when we go to the river and we blow the shofars and throw bread in the river, and I give a little teaching and things like that. Well, we're gathering for the purpose of worshiping God. That's an ecclesia. Okay? There's no church building. There's not necessarily any building at all, but it's still an ecclesia because we're an assembly gathering to worship God. And so we've been doing that. And again, the ecclesia is here tonight. So that's still the same. Now, I'm pointing out the similarities in what we have here, as opposed to what we have in our home, because we've gotten used to a certain look and feel and things. I don't know how many of you saw the clip from Hoosiers, the movie Hoosiers that I put on the Facebook page. But I put that on there because it's kind of an older movie. I saw it when I was a teenager. But one part of the movie that I remember, this basketball team that started in this comes from this really small town. So they're used to playing in this really small gymnasium, and then they end up going to the championship. And so there's this whole scene where the whole team shows up in the arena, and it's this huge arena, and they're like, and the team players are like, whoa, this is huge, and the coach says, somebody get me a measuring stick or measuring tape, and he has a measure from the bottom of the basket out to the foul line, and it's 15 feet, and then from the top of the basket down to the floor, and it's 10 feet. And he says, you'll find that those are the exact measurements that you've been playing on. And he's showing them that what really matters, what is it's still the same. What they've been playing, the court itself that they're playing on, which is what they're there to do, is really the same thing. Things might look different. It looks like a bigger place. There's going to be, a lot more people watching them, and it's a different feel. But there's a lot of things that, most important things, are the same, and that's what they have to focus on. And it's the same thing here. I talked about the Greek word for assembly, ecclesia. I like it a lot better when I go to the Old Testament to see what the Hebrew word is for a word, and there's a Hebrew word for something. I hate it when I go and there's like a dozen words for the same thing. And this one was like half a dozen that I found. But there's one, atsara, and this one is specifically used. It's a solemn assembly. It's specifically used for the gathering of people for a holiday celebration. So you'll find that when it's describing the holidays and have a solemn assembly for the Lord, and it's Sarah. Then you have Ada. Comes from a word that looks like Ed, but it's not. I like the word because the word appears in, I think it's Judges. It might be Joshua. There's an altar that's erected, and it's because of the altar is a witness to them, and the word aid, which looks like Ed, means witness, and so it's the altar of Eid, but it looks in complete Jewish Bible, it looks like Ed. And so the altar of Ed, which goes along with God's redneck name, Elroy. So Edah, it can be used for a smaller group gathering for worship. So that's pretty close to describing what we are. We're a small group that is meeting to worship God, and that's used quite a bit. Then there's kahal. The root word means to assemble or gather. It's an assembly, a congregation, a company, but it tends to imply an entire nation, and usually the whole nation of Israel. So you'll see that word a lot, again, Psalms or even Torah, when it's talking about the whole congregation or the assembly of the people of Israel. They'll use that word for that. Not so much referring to us. Then there's another word that I thought was kind of odd, cowed. Yes, there's all kinds of jokes I'm sure that you can make on the word cowed.
How do you spell that?
C-O-W-D. Transliterated, yeah. I didn't write down what the Hebrew was. Comes from the root yakad, to found, fix, establish, or lay a foundation. It can mean counsel of familiar friends or a conversation. So that would be another word that could describe what we are. You'll find that word in Psalm 89:7 and Psalm 111:1. It's not used very often, but those are two verses that you'll find that word being used. Then there's moshav. Okay, now this is the only word that I really found that could be either a place or the people. It comes from the root word yashav, which is to